Hey family, how we doing? Joseph Babai Ifa this evening, broadcasting live from Botanica Candles and More Facebook page. Yesterday we were able to come out with a bunch of different videos, bunch of interactions, really nice information that we were able to share, and we're coming at you with another Orisha video today, right? There we go with our broadcast, letting everybody know that we're going live at the moment. And today's video is going to be on a very special Orisha, a very fundamental Orisha within our faith and our spirituality. And his name is Oricha Oko, right? So we're just going to give a moment for people to begin incorporating themselves before we delve in. But within the past couple days, we've been able to come out with quite a few videos. We came out with one on Shango, came out with one on Dudua. We came out with a video, which was our open video discussion last night, where we were able to answer a bunch of questions for a bunch of different people and touch on some really great topics yesterday about how to be able to, face all the situations that we're going on or we're going against or facing as a global community, right? So, Oricha Oko, definitely a very important Orisha within the pantheon of the Yoruba. Maybe within the New World, he's not going to have the same connotations as he did maybe in Nigeria, simply because agriculture within the Western world isn't a very pertinent part for the majority of people within society, right? And, when we go back to Yoruba land and we talk about agriculture and we talk about the farmer and that role, and even within modern society, the role that the farmer plays within society, it is pretty paramount, because when we look at the amount of food and everything that is provided to us within supermarkets and different places and distributors of these materials that we need to live, everything came from a farmer, right? So definitely that's going to be a big theme within this video, is just the appreciation of the men and women who really till the earth and work the earth to be able to provide us with all the things we need to be able to sustain ourselves, right? So kudos to them. So going back to the Nigerian concept, sorry about that, my dog. Due to going back to Nigeria and speaking about the importance of the farmer, Nigerian culture, specifically Yoruba culture, is heavily agriculturally based, and within the mythology of Ifa, probably one of the most interesting progressions that we're going to see is, basically man progressing from farmer to hunter, right? And you're going to see that throughout the Yoruba mythology. Damilola Den Ifadokun Aburu Aboye Baba, watching from Las Vegas, Nevada. It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. We're going to be talking about Oricha Oko this evening. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch us. Right, we're going to be going over some nice information today. So I hope we can gather something from it, and we might be able to learn something together. So thank you so much. And within Yoruba mythology, you're going to see basically that progression of man, Asheo, that progression of man from agriculturalist or farmer to hunter and iron worker, right? And the Yoruba culture really experienced this because they were known as the bronze workers. They were known to their repertoire of weapons and all of these different things, and ultimately even into their farming methods, right? Where you see all the tools that are really associated with Oricha Oko, they're going to be very similar to what a farmer would be able to use to till the earth, right? So very important deity and very important concept in this culture, because when we're talking about the harvest, we're talking about being able to provide the Yoruba with some of their basic gastronomic needs, and probably one of the most basic culinary needs you're going to see within Yoruba culture is the yam, right? An item that Oricha Oko is strongly linked to, right? So when we're talking about Oricha Oko, we're talking about the man or the Orisha that basically provides the whole Yoruba, ethnic group and tribe with what it needs to be able to survive, right? Which is the yam. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about an Orisha, at least within, traditional Yoruba culture, of extreme importance, because he literally represents the sustenance of this whole nation, right? So in the New World, some people might look at Oricha Oko and see him as a little bit obscure, but when we're talking about traditional Ifa practice and old school Ifa practice, Oricha Oko played a very heavy role within the progression of our people. And even nowadays, you look at the role of farmers and agriculture within society and just being able to sustain the amounts of people we have on earth right now, very, very important deity. So definitely just wanted to touch on that first and foremost to really show that importance. And when we're talking about the Yoruba culture and its connection to the yam, it's completely important. I mean, we're talking about, when we're talking about Latin people, right? Me being a Cuban and Puerto Rican and a couple other things, there cannot be a plate of food in front of me that doesn't have rice, right? So when we're talking about Yoruba people, the yam is that base carbohydrate that formulates a lot of their dietary routines. So he literally provided that for them. And, there's a bunch of mythology that goes into that because of this high consumption of yam, ironically, Nigeria has the highest, production of twins, right? So you're going to see that Oricha Oko, based on him being able to cultivate the yam and feed the people, is also really associated with procreation. He's associated with the Ibeji. He's associated with this whole idea of basically the propagation of the Yoruba tribe and the human race, right? So, and that kind of takes us to our next point, right? And I always love to delve into the name of the Orishas. And when we're talking about the name Oricha Oko, once again, a compound word, right? We have the word Orisha, which means, special head or selected head or defender of Ori, right? Or extraordinary head, or somebody that had amazing qualities and capabilities that made them a deified ancestor and basically a legend. And then we have the word Oko, right? Or Oko, right? Depending on how traditionally you want to pronounce it. The word Oko has a couple different translations, right? The first way of translating it you're going to see is the farm, right? Oko literally means the farm. So when we're talking about Oricha Oko, we're talking about the Orisha of the farm. Once again, really linking him again to his office as the farmer, right? You're going to hear other people say Oko as the word for the world. But, usually when we're talking about, conversational Yoruba, it's usually referring to the farm, right? And this is where Oricha Oko spent most, if not all, of his time, right? So literally, he's known as the Orisha of the farm. So not a lot of, mystery as to what his name means there. But there's actually another way of translating the word Oko, right? And the word Oko actually refers to the male reproductive organ, right? So why would they refer to him as this, right? Oricha Oko. Well, when we look at the aspect or the idea of farming, it's somewhat of an intimate act when we talk about nature. We talk about Mother Earth, right? Or she who provides for all of us. And then we have Oricha Oko, who is the farmer, or the masculine presence, or Oko, that literally opens up the earth to be able to implant something into it so that something can grow. It's very symbolic and representative of the procreation process, right? It's nothing more than that. So that's why Oricha Oko ended up becoming basically linked to the male reproductive organ, because he is seen as the father that was able to help, Mother Earth conceive the things we need to be able to provide for us, ourselves, the children of Earth, and ultimately Oricha Oko, right? He's, to a certain degree, seen as the father of human beings, because, once again, without his office, without his position, without his job, life would not be sustainable, right? So that's why, you gotta love the Yoruba language, because one word can mean so many different things, and just to see how the different ways you can translate his name and how both of these things really touch on him and who he is and what he represents, it just shows you how divine these things are, right? So that's why, you're going to hear Oricha Oko, who is the Orisha of the farm, or Oricha Oko, the Orisha or the male Orisha that helps Mother Earth reproduce to be able to sustain all of us, right? And it's really interesting, because when we talk about the concept of him being associated with the male reproductive organ and all of these different things, if you ever get a chance to look at the traditional Oricha Oko icon, the way it's provided and things like that, it actually it's an erect staff, right, that is actually associated with that Orisha. So once again, it really lines up with what his name means. You're going to look at the tools, and it's going to resemble that same anatomy, right? From another aspect, though, the other tools that are associated with Oricha Oko also represent that duality that's necessary to be able to procreate, right? You're going to see a feminine aspect to those things as well. To be able to, realize this procreation process, we need male and female to be able to produce. So, Oricha Oko is one of those deities. You're going to see that duality, even though he is, mostly associated with being a masculine entity. But like with all the Orishas, being that they are much larger than just humans or human bodies or anything. These are forces of nature, frequencies of light. They're always going to have somewhat of a duality. Every human being has both male and feminine, male and female aspects to them. And the Orishas are no different. You're going to see that within their icons, right? So that's always interesting, just to be able to touch on all those various things that have to do with Oricha Oko. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and get into some patakis about this Orisha, right? And Oricha Oko was not a bad guy. He was actually a really, really, really good guy. He was diligent. He was honest. He was organized. He was hardworking. He really encompasses a lot of the qualities that the Yorubas believe a man should have. And once again, you look in antiquity and the role of the farmer and him taking his, his crops to the market and being able to provide to people. It was a position of great prestige, So he was a good guy all in all. But like all the Orishas and all human beings in general, nobody's perfect. So this story, which is basically one of the fundamental stories about Oricha Oko, will really touch on all of his great qualities and some of his unfortunate shortcomings that he had to overcome to be able to become Orisha and really show, the process of being a person and having a life and being able to move forward, right? So in this story, this pataki is in the Odu Iworiwode, or Iworiwodi, right? Or Iworiwodi, or Iworiwode as it's known within the Afro-Cuban practice. Oricha Oko was a farmer. He was a farmer, right? And ironically, his farm was next to the ocean, right? Or, within close proximity to the point where he could see the ocean from his farm. It provided for good soil, fertility, all these different things of his crops, right? So what happened was Oricha Oko was always constantly working. He didn't have much time for himself. He basically didn't know any other form of living. He was like, I wake up before the sun comes up, I work all day, and then, repeat. So he didn't have much time for himself. He didn't have any companionship, and he was always just trying to provide. He was a provider. This Orisha is a provider by nature. So what ended up happening is one day, Oricha Oko working noticed that there was a beautiful woman in the ocean, right? And, he wasn't rude. He didn't stare at her, but he definitely did notice, like, wow, what a beautiful woman. And what ended up happening is on a daily basis, he would walk this part of his farm and he would see that this woman was always there. To the point where he would kind of take breaks from time to time and walk across the seashore. And what ended up happening is one day, they would notice that they would kind of make eye contact, but she would never say anything to him. He began a conversation with her. And, basically, he said, hello, how are you? And she said, hi. And Oricha Oko said, I'm Oricha Oko, and, I work over there on that farm. That's my farm. And, I see you every day, and I see you alone, and I just wanted to introduce myself. I see that, sometimes we see each other, in our routines. And she said, yeah, absolutely. My name's Olokun, right? And he was like, okay, nice to meet you, and all these good things. In some versions of this story, you're going to hear Yamaya. I prefer Olokun. Oricha Oko said, well, I'll be back tomorrow. And, this process began, or this courtship began, where Oricha Oko would visit her every day. He'd bring her food. They'd talk in the water, all of these different things. And it was a really nice dating process. They really got to know each other, and, they really built a friendship. And it really culminated one day, and Oricha Oko, after this whole time, basically confessed his love for Olokun. Right? And, Olokun was taken aback because, she felt the same way. And you're going to hear various debates as well. Is Olokun a woman? Is Olokun a man? Is Olokun androgynous? All these different things. At least in this pataki, she was a woman. Correct? So what ended up happening is they basically expressed their love for each other. But Oricha Oko basically said, I'd like to marry you. I'd like to spend the rest of my life with you. And Olokun was a little bit hesitant because Olokun had a secret. Because every time Oricha Oko would come into the water, Olokun was always standing waist high in the water, to the point where the water was covering the bottom half of her body. And Olokun was saying, well, you don't really know me as well as you think you know me, because, there's other aspect of myself you haven't encountered yet, and you might not want to be with me once you see it. And Oricha Oko said, I don't care what's wrong with you. You've made me feel in a way that I've never felt before. So, whatever it is, we're going to overcome that, and we're going to be together. And Olokun said, all right, I'm going to introduce you to my father, and we'll go through the courtship process. Just don't ever say I never told you. And so basically, they set up an encounter between basically, Oricha Oko and Olodumare. And Olokun was present, and she introduced Oricha Oko to Olodumare and explained that Oricha Oko was asking for her hand in marriage. And Olodumare looked at him and said, you understand what you're getting yourself into, correct? This is my daughter. I'm God Almighty. She's the most precious thing I have. This is, very, very important to me, and you have to do things the right way with my daughter, because I'm not going to tolerate, any mistreatment of her whatsoever, or you making her feel unhappy. And Oricha Oko was taken aback. He said, the farthest thing from what I'm trying to accomplish is make your daughter unhappy. If anything, I want to make her the happiest woman on earth. And Olodumare said, all right, and you can marry her as long as you promise me to never break her heart. And Oricha Oko said, without any hesitation, believe me, she's in good hands. So they got married in the ocean, right? And, the marriage ceremony took place. It was beautiful. It was full of pomp and, luxury and all these different things. And, the moment came for Oricha Oko to take Olokun to his home, right? So the moment came when Olokun had to, basically leave the ocean. And at that moment, Oricha Oko realized what the secret was that unfortunately Olokun had issues with her legs. She had deformities in her legs. The pataki doesn't get into extreme detail, but it was something, unfortunately, that was definitely recognizable, right? So what ended up happening is Oricha Oko, being a gentleman, he continued. He said, this means little to me, not an issue, nothing we can't overcome, and they continued about their marital life, right? So Oricha Oko, it was actually a great union, not only on a romantic level, but also on a business level, because Oricha Oko would, harvest the crops and have the yams and all the things that he would need. And then Olokun, being someone that was really familiar with commerce and wealth and, how to really interact on a business level and sell things and marketing, would take Oricha Oko's products to the market and make a killing, right? So they were well off, they were stable, they were happy, they were in love, all of these different things. Oricha Oko and Olokun were very happy. But Oricha Oko had a taboo, or an ewo. And Oricha Oko's taboo was oti, or alcoholic beverages, right? And what ended up happening is from time to time, Oricha Oko, being that he would work so hard and, basically suffer from the stresses of having a family and a business and all these different things, unfortunately would drink as an outlet for all of the stress he would basically experience. And he wouldn't always do it in a positive aspect, right? Sometimes he would become belligerent. And, Olokun realized that, there were times when, the gentleman just needed his space, but she noticed little by little he was becoming progressively a little bit more belligerent, and to the point where he was even becoming abusive. Right? Not physically, but just, in his conduct. So what ended up happening is Oricha Oko, one day in a drunken stupor, made the worst decision he could ever make, and he actually went into the marketplace while Olokun was, selling his products, and basically yelled at the top of his lungs, my wife is deformed from the waist down, right? Definitely not something that needed to be done, and something that he realized as soon as he did it was a mistake. But at that moment, what was done, and Olokun went running back into the ocean to hide, right? So Oricha Oko, once he became sober, went looking for her. And he noticed that he couldn't find her, and then Olodumare presented himself and said, what have you done? And Oricha Oko, embarrassed and ashamed, looked at Olodumare and said, I made a mistake and I've broken your daughter's heart like I said I would never do, because I revealed the secret of, her anatomy and physiology and what was going on, with her legs to everyone. And Olodumare said, how do you feel? And he said, I feel horrible. Those things never mattered to me. The love I had for your daughter is what mattered, and I allowed my own vices and my own issues to interrupt our relationship rather than working through it with her as someone in a marriage should. And Olodumare looked at him and he said, you learned a very valuable lesson, but unfortunately, we have to assume the responsibilities and the consequences of our actions, even though we're sorry for them. And Olodumare basically sanctioned that they were going to live separately, but always be connected through marriage. But from that point forward, would never live together, right? So unfortunately, Olokun was greatly hurt, and she never forgot what Oricha Oko had done to her. And what she would do is, still attack him, right? So this is why in this Odu, the waves of the ocean still crash against Earth, or Oricha Oko, or Oko, earth or land, till this day, because Olokun is still hurt and still disgruntled about how Oricha Oko publicly shamed her in front of everyone. So, Olokun being the ocean, the waves crash against the earth, Oricha Oko, and it shows that constant dispute from that point forward. And needless to say, Oricha Oko lived the rest of his life, in sadness, because he lost the love of his life, and he was basically, delegated back to his previous life, which was wake up, work, and go to bed without love and companionship. So, beautiful story in the beginning, sad story towards the end, but definitely one with a lot of lessons, and one that really exemplifies the character of Oricha Oko. It shows how somebody who was, maybe somewhat marginal, someone that didn't come from necessarily, great beginnings. Forgive me. From great beginnings, was able to meet somebody that really fulfilled him and became his other half, but unfortunately couldn't handle all of the weight that came with, this wonderful life that he had always seen for himself. And because of it, he lost a great opportunity and a great relationship and all these different things. And so it really touches on that, and it really speaks on as well the relationship between Earth and the ocean. And even to this day, within nature, we see that the waves are constantly crashing against Earth. And it is symbolic of Olokun never forgiving Oricha Oko and somewhat trying to hurt Oricha Oko the same way Oricha Oko hurt her. Oricha Oko hurt her with words, but Olokun ultimately responded physically with the waves, right? So, but regardless of which, Oricha Oko was going to feel the pain of losing Olokun. So that's one of the fundamental patakis in this Odu of Iwori Ode that speaks about Oricha Oko and sort of his beginnings and relationship within nature, right? But one moment. Excuse me, guys. So that's one pataki about Oricha Oko. Pretty basic one, but definitely one with a lot of lessons and explains a lot about him, his interaction with the religion. We're going to go ahead and get into another one. And if we're talking about Oricha Oko as the farmer, this video was actually inspired by someone who reached out to me within the last 2 days, seeing that we were coming out with a bunch of material, and asked me to make a video on Oricha Oko. And of course, I am one to oblige. Definitely not an Orisha I was thinking about talking about yet, but no reason why we can't, because he's very, very, very important in our practice. And the person was really asking me, how does this Orisha kind of manifest in the Odu of Irete Gudang, right? For those who are familiar with this Odu, this is one, or Irete Gudang is also Irete Ogunda or Irete Keda, right? You're going to notice that Irete Gudang is one of the Odus kind of associated with the ceremony of the feeding of the earth, or the sacrifices given to the earth, right? So he wanted to understand how we can interpret and find the connection between this Odu of Irete Gudang and the Oricha Oko. And Irete Gudang, once again, is a very, very dear Odu to me, because it was the Odu of, my late father-in-law, Robert Montañez, Awoni Oromila Irete Kutan. He was a son of Odudua and also a hero from 9/11. So may he rest in peace. And it's an Odu that I'm very familiar with. But I'll be frank with you, when I first heard this question, I had to take a moment to really sit back and see, where Oricha Oko kind of fills in or falls into this grand scheme of what is Irete Kutan. Because at first glance, you're going to look at this Odu and you're going to think, well, Oricha Oko definitely has to have something to do there, or a pataki there, because, it speaks of the feeding of the earth. But, at first glance, you might not necessarily catch one. But I was able to come to the conclusion and kind of see where Oricha Oko kind of fills in or into this Odu. So we're going to get into that right now. And what happened in Irete Kutan is that Irete Kutan was a farmer, ironically, right? And what Irete Kutan did is he would farm, right? He would open holes in the earth and farm and plant and do all of these other things, right? But the thing about Irete Kutan he was very good at everything he did. And, farming was no exception, right? He would farm, things would plant, things would grow, and things were going very well for him because he would take his crops and sell them and make money, and he was an influential character in the community. He was somebody that was, interacted with well and well-liked by the community. But within the religious community or amongst the deities, he wasn't necessarily well-liked, and the reason being was because Irete Kutan had a habit of not asking for permission before opening the earth, interacting with the earth, planting the earth. He didn't ask permission or pay tribute to the deities or to the other positions in nature to be able to carry out this process, right? So in the beginning, Irete Kutan was doing wonderfully, making a lot of money, prosperity, influence, all of these different things. But with time, due to the jealousy, envy, and the negativity that, the other deities in nature was having upon him, his crops started dying, right? So what ended up happening is Irete Kutan noticed this, and, he did divination for himself, and he came with his Odu of Irete Kutan, and it told him he had to go visit Olodumare and see what was the cause of his issue. So when Irete Kutan went to Olodumare, Irete Kutan said, hey, Ifa told me to come speak to you and, to let you know that, my crops are dying. I'm really not sure what my next step is going to be. I'm looking to you for advice and consolation, And Olodumare looked at him with surprised eyes and said, oh, you want to come and ask me for advice now when everything's going badly, but before you started, you didn't ask for permission or advice, so I have nothing to say to you, Maybe if you would have divined Ifa and gotten this message before you started doing things on your own, maybe we would have been able to avoid this altogether. But like I said, I have nothing to say to you, and I'm dismissing you from my presence. Maybe you can go speak to the mountain, and the mountain will give you some advice if you're lucky. And Irete Kutan was really surprised, but obviously he had nothing else to say, so he kind of just, respectfully retired from Olodumare's house. Oh, blessings, Anthony. Thank you so much for watching, my brother. Nothing but blessings to you. Please take care of you and your family. Blessings. And so when Irete Kutan went to the mountain, he looked at the mountain. He paid his respects. He said hello, and he basically repeated the same process. And the mountain gave him the same answer, calling him, disrespectful, calling him and saying he was ungrateful, and all of these different things. And Irete Kutan was like, oh man, where do I go now? And, the mountain basically told Irete Kutan, go to the ocean and see if she'll help you. So he was like, all right, here we go, respectfully retire. And then he went to the ocean, right? The ocean is Olohun. Let's remember that before we do this nice big interpretation when we come back around. And he looked at the ocean, he said hello, he explained the situation, and the ocean said, I definitely want nothing to do with you. And the ocean basically spit in his face by sending a wave his way and leaving him completely drenched and telling him to get out of my face, go away, in a very rude fashion for the same reasons, being that he never spoke to anybody before he started doing all these things. So Irete Kutan, feeling defeated, went back to his farm, right? And when he went back to his farm, he was depressed and he was going through his situation, and he actually spoke to Mother Earth. And he said, what can we do to better our situation? And Mother Earth looked at him and she said, wow, you really have some nerve. after you disrespect me, after you pay me no tribute to be able to use me and plant within me, after you open a hole in me, and after you do all these things, you're asking me for advice and for help. Well, check this out. The best way I'm going to help you is by eating you. And at that moment, Irete Kutan was consumed by the earth because the earth opened a hole and basically grabbed Irete Kutan and took him into the earth and consumed him, and he was never able to return. Or, the food of the earth, or the feeding of the earth, ended up being Irete Kutan for not offering sacrifice and tribute before moving forward with his aspirations of becoming a very successful farmer. So, in one aspect, the protagonist is Irete Kutan. But we could also say that Irete Kutan is Oricha Oko, right? Because we're talking about a farmer. We're talking about somebody who is working the land and taking advantage of the land and reaping what he's sowing. But this actually goes back to Yoruba culture, right? On an annual basis, within Yoruba land, you have things like the Yam Festival, the Harvest Festival, all of these things, to be able to secure a safe and prosperous harvest. So what happens is they feed the earth, they make sacrifices, there's merriment, there's joy, there's all of these things to secure these things, and then they proceed with their practices and their methods. Orisha Oko or Irete Kutan didn't do this. He simply started without taking nature into account and paying the proper tribute to ensure his success and blessings, right? So it kind of goes back to the story we were just talking about, where Orisha Oko, unfortunately, took things into his own hands, right? He didn't consider other people before making decisions. And this may be a common theme within this Orisha, is that, at first glance, you can look at Oricha Oko and feel sorry for him during every pataki, but we also have to look at what could he have done better to avoid certain outcomes. And a big thing would have been conversation and communication. Oricha Oko never expressed his weight that he was bearing in the first pataki about all the responsibilities that he had, and because of it, it caused him to explode and say things he didn't mean. And then in the second pataki of Irete Kutan, if we're going to interpret this as Oricha Oko, he didn't take into account other people and how his actions were affecting them. So this is kind of a common theme with this Orisha. So definitely something to think about if you're a priest of Oricha Oko or a child of Oricha Oko. Not saying that you're going to fall into that conduct, but it is definitely something you want to avoid, because this Orisha fell into that in multiple manifestations, right? And if you look at what happened, Oricha Oko went to Olofin when things went bad. In the first pataki, Olodumare unfortunately cursed him for his actions, and in this one, Olodumare also cursed him because he didn't pay him tribute. As far as the mountain, is symbolic of another place in nature that was not happy. It's a very earthy, very, earth element position. And if Oricha Oko represents the earth and the mountains, for him to not be well viewed by this position was sincerely ensuring his downfall, right? When we talk about the ocean in Irete Kutan, in this same story, could be Olokun. And Olokun obviously didn't have good relationships with Oricha Oko based on the other story when all this kind of started, right? So once again, he fell into that trap, and then ultimately the earth consumed him because the one position that he needed to make sure was on his side was the earth, and he did not do so. So not only did he lose everything, he ultimately lost his life because he did not provide sacrifice to the earth, and the earth was how he lived, or what he was able to provide himself with. So the fact that he disrespected and didn't consider this position was a grave, grave, grave mistake that ultimately cost his life. So to that viewer who was asking about, how does Oricha Oko kind of fall into Irete Kutan, that's a perfect story right there. Someone who, when we're talking about, I remember the question was, they say that Oricha Oko, or they had told this person that Oricha Oko was the savior of Irete Kutan. In a positive manifestation, yes. Because if the proper steps are taken within the Oricha Oko initiation for the person, you're going to receive great benefits, because ultimately Oricha Oko, to the person that is Irete Kutan, is going to provide great benefits, because when you feed the earth and when you go through this, all these things, you're ensuring your success, not only from a prosperity, economic stability aspect, but from your health as well. So that's the best way I can answer that question. And to that viewer, thank you so much for that, because it's definitely going to aid a lot of people as they move forward in learning about this Orisha and probably ultimately receiving it. So we talked about how Oricha Oko kind of, interacted with the Oduire de Gudang and how that can be interpreted. We talked about the Harvest Festival and the sacrifices and the Yam Festival as well. And the Yam Festival is once again a very important part of the year for the Yorubas, as well as the Harvest Festival, because it is the basis of their diet. The yam is utilized for everything. The creation of the iyong flour, the elubo flour, all of these things, amala. These are like basic things that they eat, and the yam is very important for that. So touching on the importance of Oricha Oko and the importance of the ceremony of feeding the earth and all the things that are kind of interrelated with Oricha Oko, right? So we touched on all of those things. Let's go ahead and touch on the relationship of Oricha Oko and Shango, right? They are brothers, believe it or not. And they're both the sons of Olodumare. And they actually had a pretty turbulent relationship, right? And Boruboya Mihala, good evening. And Boru to my godson as well, and to the family, and say hello to mom, right? Blessings. Hope everybody's doing well. And what ended up happening was these two were brothers, and at one point they were the best of friends. They loved each other dearly. There was a great fraternity there. They respected each other, all of these beautiful things. But they lived two very different lives. Shango was a warrior and a general for the Oyo Empire, obviously. He was the Alafin, the ruler, etc. And Oricha Oko was a farmer, right? But Oricha Oko played a great role in Shango's army because he would feed all of Shango's soldiers and make sure they were, nice and well fed and strong for battle. So, Shango always appreciated his brother, all of these different things. But one day, Oricha Oko actually felt injured. He actually had broken his foot or twisted his ankle on the farm. And Shango had a very big battle that was about to basically, erupt. And he needed every able-bodied man to be able to fight, right? So when he went looking for his brother to follow him in the battle, Oricha Oko said, I'm incapable of doing this, right? Well, tell JCM to listen. It's time to study Ifa, right? School's out, Ifa is in. And Oricha Oko told him, my brother, I can't fight due to the condition of my leg. But, I can make sure that you guys are going to have all of the necessities to be able to win. Or you're going to be well fed, your army's going to be sustained, all of these things. So this is what I can provide you. And Shango was not happy, but he really didn't have time to address that at that moment. He had to organize his forces to prepare for the battle that was going to be in the day to come. So unfortunately, Shango lost, right? Shango lost. And when he came back, he was in such a bad mood that, when Oricha Oko came to see him and all these different things, Shango cursed him and said, you're a coward, and insulted him and shamed him in front of basically the town. And Oricha Oko was greatly hurt by this, right? Olodumare, who would visit Oricha Oko from time to time on the farm to interact with his son, noticed that, Oricha Oko was depressed and, had been crying and all these different things. And, Olodumare said, my son, what is the matter? And Oricha Oko said, nothing at all. Nothing at all. And Olodumare knew something was wrong, so he kind of looked at Shango and said, Shango, what's going on with your brother? He looks a little depressed. You guys are always together. I noticed you guys haven't been around each other in a while. What's happening? And Shango spoke negatively of Oricha Oko and said, my brother's a coward. It's because of him that I lost my battle, right? And Olodumare said, well, where did you get that conclusion from? He said, no, he didn't join me in battle. And he said, well, was the food provided to your soldiers? He was like, yes, no, Oricha Oko provided that. And Olodumare said, well, were you actually prepared for battle? Did you create a strategy, or did you just kind of go with these, random, ideas that you get and you think you're invincible and you just went into battle a little too soon? irresponsibly? And is that why you lost, And Shango kind of stayed quiet. And he sent one of his emissaries to go find Oricha Oko, and he called the townspeople together, and he held a gathering. And Olodumare looked at Oricha Oko and he said, your brother would like to apologize to you for his conduct. And Shango did apologize because he realized that it was not Oricha Oko's fault that he had lost. It was his own fault because he was somebody that really would take really rash actions without really planning them. And, he was just frustrated with his loss, and because of it, he insulted his brother's honor and reputation, which ultimately he redeemed at that moment. Oricha Oko accepted the apology, and and at that moment, Olodumare told Shango, from this day forward, your brother will wear your colors, as a representation that he is as courageous and as useful and as necessary to this army as you are. Right? And till this day, that's why the Oricha Oko tile is red and white, right? And depending on whether you're a man or a woman, it's painted in a certain diagram. But these colors are representative of the pact that Shango made with Oricha Oko to always, hold him in high regard, right? And his respect and his apology for the way he had treated Oricha Oko and accusing him of a cowardice when that was the farthest thing from the truth, because Oricha Oko would have went into battle with his brother if he would have been able-bodied, even though he was not a soldier or warrior by trade, right? So a little bit of explanation there, because a lot of people have asked me, Joseph, why is the tile of Oricha Oko red and white? Is there a connotation with Shango? And there definitely is, right? So that's actually where that comes from. And for all those who are interested in knowing the Odu and things like that, please feel free to reach out. So it talks about that, right? His relationship with Shango. And Oricha Oko had quite a few interactions with Shango, but that's probably the most fundamental one. And these are a couple of the patakis that kind of touch on Oricha Oko, his character. Unfortunately, he's just a guy that really got the short end of the stick a lot of the time, He had issues with being able to express what he was going through because, he was such a stoic personality. He never wanted to throw anybody under the bus. He never wanted to put his problems or anything that he was going through on the people around him. And, because of this, he was definitely a misunderstood Orisha, and that's why you're going to see that he's really solitary, right? You're not going to see many patakis where Oricha Oko was surrounded by a group of people, as opposed to Shango, who really couldn't go anywhere without being, completely surrounded by an entourage, right? So definitely contrasts in those personalities, but in the end of the day, Shango had to pay homage to Oricha Oko and thank him for at least giving him a fighting chance, right? Because a lot of his victories were owed to Oricha Oko being able to provide for him and his united forces, right? So definitely touches on that, right? You're going to hear with this debate as to who is sacrificed to first, right? The first thing, a lot of people, the first person they're going to say is Eshu. And this is true. Eshu is the first person that is designated to consume first or eat first, right? And when we do come out with a video on Eshu that we haven't come out with, because I want that to be that is going to be a video that's going to be so in-depth that I really have to have all my ducks in a row. But we're definitely going to get into why Eshu is the first to eat, and there's so many patakis that touch on that. But, with any fight, it is designated that the first person to eat is Eshu, right? No one eats before Eshu. But, there is another debate that, Ogun is the first one to eat because technically he is the knife. He is the violent action that is necessary to be able to sacrifice. He is the constructor of the knife, all of these different things. And that's also a very, viable argument as well, right? And then you're going to hear another argument where Oricha Oko is the first one technically to eat because he represents the earth and the soil. And, unfortunately, no matter how versed you are in sacrifice, there's always a drop that goes misplaced of the blood of the animal. So, what is the definitive answer there? I would go with Eshu, me personally, my opinion, because regardless of wherever the blood kind of goes first, Eshu is in all places and spaces regardless of wherever the icon is, right? Even when we're feeding Egum, and I've had debates with some traditional practitioners And once again, we here at Joseph Baba Ifa, we greatly, respect the Isese Lagba tradition and all the Onisese and all the people who practice our beautiful faith from a traditional standpoint. And I've gotten into debates with them and we've conversed and, I've been able to explain to them that, yes, it is true. Within the Afro-Cuban tradition, we do feed Egun first, but, there is an Eshu that actually lives there, and he's known as Ashikpelu or Ashikwelu, and he's the Eshu that has to do with the border between this world and the next. And even Eshu is eating there together with Egun, regardless of whoever or whatever you're doing. Even if the icon's not there, Eshu, his spirituality, his energy is definitely creeping in and getting some of whatever's being given. So regardless of the action, regardless of the physical aspect of it as to where the blood's touching first and all these things, me personally, I don't believe Oricha Oko is the first one to consume. It could even be as far like Eshu's always going to be first. He's always going to make sure he gets that first, because if he doesn't, the ceremony really isn't able to progress the way it's meant to. But as far as just this interaction between Eshu, Ogun, Oricha Oko, it's a really interesting thing because they're all right there, and you look at the elements of what's occurring here, and these are like the basic elements of like mankind. We have Eshu, who represents the ancestors. He represents our shadow. He represents the prehistoric man, right? The beginnings when we were, herbivores, when we were, agriculture, when we were all of these things. That state of human being. And then we have Ogun, right? We have the constructor of knife, that progress. Going from agriculturalist to hunter blacksmith, right? The progression of the Yoruba. And then we have Oricha Oko, who kind of made all this happen, right? He represents the earth, us being able to carry out these processes because of, the stability he provided. So it's just, I'm not really touching on this to basically say Eshu number one, Ogun this, Oricha Oko that. It's just to really create that link between these deities at the moment of sacrifice, because most people would probably look at Oricha Oko and really see him as a very docile, introverted, somewhat timid deity, when he's really, he's right there every time a sacrifice or an offering is given. Even when we put the offerings on the floor, even when we're offering to any Orisha, he's involved. He's very involved in all the aspects of our faith, right? So definitely wanted to touch on that. His priesthood is very selective, very selective. I've met very few children of Oricha Oko, very few. I actually met a Babalawo once, who his mother was Oshun and his father was Oricha Oko, definitely very rare. I actually have met a Babalawo who is a child of Oricha Oko. As far as children of Oricha Oko, I think from an Orisha standpoint, I've maybe met one or two. And if I did, I think they were both in Cuba. But his priesthood is very rare. Within the Afro-Cuban tradition, unfortunately, from what I understand up until this point, the direct crowning of Oricha Oko is not in frequency over here. It's not something that you're going to see. Usually what happens is you're going to be initiated into the mysteries of Yemaya, because, Yemaya speaks for Oricha Oko, and that kind of goes back to, the pataki that we spoke of beforehand, and there's also another pataki that touches on why, Yemaya kind of speaks for Oricha Oko, because, she kind of took away his rights to speak, because if we look at the first story, Orokun could have also been Yemaya, and that's why I touched on the versions of both of them, because when Oricha Oko overly expressed himself when he shouldn't have about things that he shouldn't have spoken about, he lost his right to speak. Olodumare cursed him at that moment and said, you cannot speak for yourself anymore. Yemaya will measure your words out so that you don't say anything you're not supposed to or don't mean. So you don't say any of her secrets, right? And Orokun as well was involved in this. So that's why that interpretation came from that, right? There's also another pataki from a traditional standpoint where the art of divination of cowries was being... actually, very nice song for Oricha Oko just came on. So when the art of the cowrie divination or the Erindi Logon was being really taught at that moment, Oricha Oko was one of the deities that actually didn't arrive, as far as the pataki explained, and there were a couple other deities that didn't show up either. One of them, was Bawaluaye, one of them was Inle. And you're going to hear various debates that, Inle speaks through Yemaya and Bawaluaye Zita through Ifa from the Arara standpoint. And, we're not trying to debate on that. But, these are the various interpretations and how, someone's going to be able to fulfill their destiny from the Afro-Cuban standpoint, being a child of Oricha Oko. So now, from what I understand, within traditional practice, the initiation into the Oricha Oko priesthood still does exist and is somewhat, thriving and of utmost importance, because once again, we're touching on the importance of the farmer, of the yam, of all of these processes within Yoruba culture. I've read various things about his priesthood. I remember I read some literature when I was younger that you're going to see that they actually, some people do come into trance with Oricha Oko from a traditional standpoint. I mean, up until this point within the Afro-Cuban practice, I've never seen anybody come down with Oricha Oko. But I have heard that in traditional practice, it does occur. He tends, and this is based on literature that I've read beforehand, that he tends to, really mount his elegun that are women, right? Or the children of his that are women. He tends to come through there. I'm not sure how authentic it is. It might be much more balanced than what that article may have said. But these are the things I've heard about his priesthood. Also that, he has quite a bit to do with the moon as well, because from what I understand, the moon plays a significant role spiritually as well as methodically within the practice of farming, right? So you're going to see those symbolisms and symbols and all of these things kind of linking him to that position in nature, or that object of the moon, right? Offerings to Oricha Oko. He has some preferred things. I've noticed that the guinea hen is an animal that's pretty associated with him. You're actually going to hear a couple debates as to whether Oricha Oko should be offered nyame or yam or not, right? And there's a couple pataki that speak on, it was because of the yam that Oricha Oko was cursed by Obatala, right? You're going to hear other people say, that's erroneous, and, how can we not offer yam to Oricha Oko? I'm not a huge fan of immediate things, like end-all things. Like, we can't offer this to an Orisha, we can't offer that to an Orisha. It's highly debatable. I mean, when in doubt, refer to Orumila, refer to your hand of Ifa, refer to the story, refer to your logic, refer to your study, and come to your own conclusions. But, I know plenty of people that offer yam to Oricha Oko, they're doing just fine. I know people who don't offer yam to Oricha Oko, they're doing just fine. At the end of the day, it's not going to be one of those things where, it's going to be a catastrophic result because we don't offer it. But I will say that when I did hear this pataki and I did, get this information, I was a little perplexed because, the first thing you think, Oricha Oko, yam, any type of tuber, any type of, vegetable or fruit, however those are technically referred to, those are the first things you think you would offer to him. So I was a little taken aback, but I do know people that still offer quite a bit of yam to Oricha Oko. He is particular to ori, or shea butter, definitely. Oricha Oko lives outside, ideally. It's his natural environment. In the United States, not everybody has the opportunity to really have these things outside. In Cuba, it may have been the same thing, but we couldn't really have our things outside. In Yoruba land, it's a different culture. This is so entrenched in their day-to-day life. You'll see an Oricha Oko icon and kind of be like, oh, that's cool. And even in Cuba, you'll see that and you'll be like completely normal. Miami, these are just environments where you're going to see a lot of it. But, another aspect to this is that, from what I understand, there's a different ethic within certain communities. So some people might be resistant to leave some of their Orisha icons outside, to make sure they're not tampered with or anything like that. So ideally, he does live outside. But if, you're unable to go ahead and have him outside, the garage or whatever, the patio, an enclosed patio or maybe a shed, that's perfectly fine as well. The Orisha understands. But it's definitely a deity within the Afro-Cuban tradition that is very, very popular, received quite frequently. Provides a lot of benefits, prosperity, health, a bunch of really nice things, a really beautiful deity. And, if you're hand of Ifa, and Orumila has identified it as a positive Orisha for you to receive, definitely one you might want to look into. There's options when it comes to this, right? We have the traditional aspect. The Afro-Cuban tradition also has a manifestation within Ifa that is given by the Babalawos. And the Orishas also have a very beautiful ceremony and a form of giving it as well. This deity as well, I believe, because I spoke about this in my video for Odudua, is also one of those deities that I believe in the past was given between both priesthoods, between the Orisha and the Babalawo. Because, when you look and you hear and you see what these different ceremonies really involve, you can kind of see where both priesthoods would have fallen into each other's kind of methods, right? So hopefully we'll get back to a point where everybody can interact and we can give this deity in a very complete format to the person that's receiving it, right? Definitely a beautiful deity. You talk about Oricha Oko and you can't help but just feel good about it, because he really was a great guy. He really was somebody that, would just work hard every day, and he really has great lessons to teach, and definitely an Orisha that we can learn from. So definitely want to open up the floor. I see we got about 5 people now that are watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in. We got great responses yesterday when we opened up the floor for people to ask questions. So definitely we're doing that right now. So does anybody have any follow-up questions about Oricha Oko? Any of the themes that we've touched on, anything further that we really want to get into, please, the opportunities right here. Please don't be shy, guys. Any questions? I think you might have gone over this. What are you referring to, Diana? Oh, okay. Yeah, absolutely. We did touch on that a little bit. Within the Afro-Cuban, no worries. Within the Afro-Cuban tradition, Oricha Oko is not crowned directly, unfortunately. That information, being that this was a very selective demographic of practitioners, that information really didn't arrive in full regard, right, in its fullness. But the option that's also based on pataki from the Afro-Cuban tradition is that the person is crowned Yemaya. And Orisha Oko was obviously their father. The process is taken forward in that regard. So that's the option we have within the Afro-Cuban tradition. Now, when we're talking about within the traditional practice, Oricha Oko, from what I understand, still is crowned, or there still is a priesthood, like you're initiated into Oricha Oko. Yes, within Nigeria, from what I understand, definitely, and being a child of Oricha Oko, regardless of the religious climate that we find ourselves within, at the end of the day, they kind of have to come to a conclusion as to what path they want to take. Because, you're going to have some children of Oricha Oko who are like, I'm within the Afro-Cuban tradition. I want to function within the Afro-Cuban tradition. I'm going to go ahead and do the Yemaya process and kind of move forward like that, which I understand, because they may have, doubts about whether they're going to be able to function if they get crowned in Nigeria and then come back. And, maybe not every child of Oricha Oko is going to have path to become a Babalawo. Not everybody is going to want to just practice spiritism. Some people are going to want to be able to function within this Ibodo, or room of Orisha. And, they might just want to fall in that way. Or some people are going to be like, no, I'd rather actually crown my guardian Orisha directly, which is perfectly respectable as well. these are the things that they may go through. When we're talking about children of Oricha Oko, they are rare. It's definitely not one that is going to be one of the first ones probably asked in a hand of Ifa ceremony, because of things like this. But once again, at the end of the day, when we ask Orumila and Orumila responds, his word is law. So if you're marked a child of Oricha Oko within your hand of Orumila Isefa, you're definitely a child of Oricha Oko. It's just a matter of your religious household and the people who are kind of handling that situation to make sure they have options for you to be able to fulfill your destiny and your spiritual needs, and provide you with the best options to be able to move forward if priesthood is your desire and your goal, right? So definitely a selective priesthood and a selective Orisha. Like I said, in 16 years of interacting with this culture, I've literally met like less than 4. So definitely not a common thing, but wonderful question, and good that we were able to reiterate it. Does Oricha Oko speak in other Odus besides Irete Kutan? Definitely, my friend. Within the Afro-Cuban tradition, one of the Odus where Oricha Oko first manifested was Iwori Odi, or Iwori Wode, or Iwori Wodi, Iwori Wode. Definitely speaks of in that Odu. Plenty of other Odus that you're gonna hear patakis about Oricha Oko. I've read patakis in Oturarico about him. And Oricha Oko is one of those Orishas that you're not going to necessarily look at a Odu or a pataki and you're going to be like, oh, this story, this Itang, is mentioning Oricha Oko as a man, and he did this and he did that, etc. It's really going to come down to the interpretation, and that's why the scriptures of Ifa are so beautiful, because they're so open, right? Excuse me. So when we look at the story of even Irete Kutan or Irete Ogunda, the gentleman is not necessarily spoken of as Oricha Oko, but when we kind of look at the characteristics of the protagonist of the pataki, it's obviously Oricha Oko. Or even in my Odu of Irete Suka, Ese Kangola, or Irete Ese Kangola, Irete Otura Ese Kangola says Irete Otura placed his foot on the wealth, right? Because Irete Otura speaks of the crop of the corn, or the crops being that corn is not necessarily a native crop to Africa. It was something that was added into the corpus that is legitimate as well. It speaks of a man that stepped on the earth and was able to pull the wealth out of it. Irete Suka, like Oturarico, speaks of this, where the person was able to pull, and Irete Kutan, where the person was able to pull the wealth out of the earth. You can interpret this as Oricha Oko as well, and it being a harmonious deity in my sign, or maybe even something that I'd want to incorporate in my practice. So Oricha Oko is one of those deities, being that he's so obscure, you can't necessarily look for a pataki always where Oricha Oko is here, he did this. They do exist, but it's not going to be as frequent as like a Shango. It's not going to be as frequent as like an Obadala, because these are Orishas that are present in every Odu. I can't think of a sign where these guys aren't present. So you're gonna be able to kind of identify it more like that. And if you look at the basis of Yoruba culture, every Odu is gonna speak about Oricha Oko, because the Yorubas, we're very and please don't misinterpret what I'm saying. We're very basic when it comes to what we feel is important, and these are the basic things of life, and technically this hasn't changed. What are we thinking about as human beings? We're thinking about food, right? We need to eat, so Oricha Oko, right? We're thinking about procreation, right? We're thinking about having families and continuing the human race. We're thinking about economic stability. We're thinking about health. We're thinking about all these different things. So when we're talking about the basis of life, these are the things that the Yoruba tribe and philosophy was really concerned with. And if you notice, one of those pillars is food, right? And where did food come from? It came from Oricha Oko. So there's definitely going to be some connotation in every Odu of Ifa about Oricha Oko, because he is one of the oldest, one of the original deities, because he was there in the beginning. Without him, life would not have been able to progress. So technically, when you ask me, what other Odus does he speak in, I have to say all of them, because every Odu is going to have a verse about the earth, Every Odu is going to have a verse about some type of interaction. I mean, you could even go like Eyobe. We look at Eyobe. Eyobe speaks of the yam. You know, that's Oricha Oko. You know, there's even a story in Eyobe that speaks of Awoku Kunduku, who was the awo of the boniado, or the sweet potato, and he would work the earth. You know, you could even say that was Oricha Oko. And ironically, that gentleman was married to Yemaya. You're going to see a lot of Yemaya in those patakis as well, because this is the woman that, you know, he was married to and interacted with. So, you know, and all of the Odus are going to speak of that. You look at Oyekumei, and Oyekumei says, you know, working Ifa every day is far more gratifying or better than working under the sun on a farm. That's referring to Orisha Oko. You know, Okanamei speaks of this as well. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. So Orisha Oko is going to be one of those, like, those fundamental deities and Orishas that's going to be in every Odu, my friend. So, wonderful question, because he's really everywhere. And he's one of those, and with the obscure Orishas, when we're talking about like Orisha Oko and Inle, and Oba, you know, these deities, people don't realize how much of at the forefront they are. But what ended up happening was the cultures changed. So when we're in Africa, we're worried about farming. We're worried about all the things that some of these, like even an Ochosi to a certain degree, or an Ode is somewhat of an obscure Orisha in the New World, even though he's more popular than Orisha Oko. But, you know, in Africa, he was one of the primary, you know, groups, because the hunters were the guys in society that made sure we were eating. They were providers. Like Ogun within Yoruba society is seen like the epitome of manhood, and in Cuban culture it ended up being Shango. So you can see the difference in views and cultures, you know. And in Yoruba land, we were worried about making sure we had tools, we had things to protect ourselves with, and processed food and all these other things. And in Cuba, we had a different lifestyle. You know, we were more worried about progressing, political progression, you know, enjoyment of life due to the oppression that we've suffered, you know, through certain government systems. So you're going to see that difference. So it's the same thing with something like Orisha Oko. It's not that he's any less pertinent. It's just that cultures have changed, situations have changed. And even within that, in Cuba, you're going to have that Santero who lives in Camagüey, who, you know, he's a farmer, and he's like, Orisha Oko is my guy, you know. So it really is from an angle of interpretation, right? No, thank you for that. Yeah, absolutely. No, the pleasure's all mine. I mean this when I say this. Ifa is what I like the most. So to be able to really delve into these things and break them down, so we can get a better understanding of them, and it's just such a rich literature. It's such a rich corpus because it's alive. Ifa is alive. It's not like we're just reading some random mythology, and, you know, it's just something we're going to talk about around the campfire. We have a divination system that provides us with this information so that we're going to live better lives because of it. And this is why I've dedicated my life to this, because it really is going to help make you a better human being if you assimilate it and understand it. Ifa and Orumila said, he who will survive is the one who understands me the most. Right? So that's why we have to study Ifa. That's why we have to understand Ifa, understand our Odus first and foremost, and then we're going to live wonderful lives, right? Because we're going to assimilate this wonderful code of conduct and spirituality, right? Wonderful questions, guys. Really wonderful questions. Really wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. What else do we have? Okay, then. Perfect. Hey, Adrian. What's going on, my brother? Guys, Giancarlos, sorry to interrupt, guys. Can I get a bottle of water, please? Thank you. Alrighty then, family. Is it recommended to receive Orisha Oko in the Odu of Iworikosun? I can't say that there's any taboos against it, right? If we're talking about Iworikosun, I don't see. Thank you so much. I don't see any taboos or restrictions in it. He's not a negative Orisha from what I can recall. I'm trying to think if there's any patakis or anything that really express any type of, you know, issue with Orisha Oko. I can't imagine. Just one moment to really think it over. I can't at the moment. I mean, I doubt it, but I don't see any issues with that. I don't see any issues with someone with Iwori Kosun receiving Orisha Oko. With those kind of deities, though, it really depends on the person's goals. And I'm gonna get into that right now. Because usually, if the person is trying to become an Orisha priest or get initiated into their head Orisha, you're usually not gonna necessarily want to initiate in another Orisha beforehand, other than Orumila, right, and those deities, right? Because technically, you want the first Orisha that speaks to you to be your guardian Orisha, right? So it really depends. If the person is more like, I'm not gonna end up becoming an Orisha priest, I'd like to just receive other deities and things like that, you might want to go ahead and receive Orisha Oko technically. But if your plan is to crown Orisha, you usually want to take that step first, and at that point you can start delving into other deities, because no deity is going to provide you with more blessings or more fulfillment than your guardian Orisha, right? If your guardian Orisha was Orisha Oko, I would go ahead and probably receive him even before crowning Orisha within the Afro-Cuban practice, because that way you're experiencing your guardian Orisha before you go through the process of crowning Yemaya, etc. So, but as far as in the Odu of Iwori Kosun, no, I don't see any. Nothing comes to my mind at the moment that would be like taboo about receiving Orisha Oko at all. Awesome, guys. Keep the questions coming. Keep the questions coming, definitely. Any questions about Orisha Oko? Any questions pertaining to him? Definitely, the floor is definitely open. And that's really a great point to bring up as well, because when we're talking about deities that are best to receive, Orumila is really the one who's going to help us identify that, because there's an Odu known as Otura Diyu that actually says that not every deity is compatible with everybody, right? And who basically identifies which deities are compatible with us are Orula, right? And the reason being is because Orumila doesn't necessarily have any interest in which deities we receive after Hand of Ifa when we receive our life Odu, because at that point we've already received him. Orumila is obligatory, right? So that's where it really comes into play. So it's a great angle and question to have, basing it on from our Odu of Iwori Kosun or whatever Odu we have in Hand of Ifa, right? So it's very important, because if we look at and like even it really is interpreted, because you can look even at the Odu Iwori Ode, which is where Orisha Oko manifested, and the first thing people might say is you should receive it because Orisha Oko was manifested there, and that's perfectly legitimate as well. But Ifa says that at the same time Orisha Oko and Yemaya or Olokun came into conflict. So not to say that we're the Orishas, but Ifa is just letting us know to be careful when we receive certain deities, to be prepared with certain things that may present themselves after we go through that process, right? Or who to receive these deities with, so it's definitely something to take into account, right? Because if you're Iwori Ode and you're about to go through that process with someone, the guardian angel they have and all these things comes into play, and Orumila is really trying to just avoid conflict between people. So that's why it's so important to analyze the Odu. But it really comes down to the interpretation of your elders, your Odu and your situation, analyzing guardian angel and all these other etceteras, right? So that's why, Rumila is so key when it comes to receiving deities, because if a deity provided harm to someone in an Odu, it might not be the best idea to receive them, right? Or if they're not mentioned altogether. Because what occurs sometimes is, other positions kind of start recommending this long list of deities that we have to receive based on certain other divinations. And, Oduratiyu says he who recommends the deities for the person from a beneficial standpoint is Orumila. Because Orumila has no interest in who you necessarily receive. So that's why Hand of Ifa is going to be a big defining factor on the deities you should receive. Or, you might have a sign that doesn't say not to receive it. It doesn't say to receive it. It might just be from interpretation, or the opportunity comes up. And if it's not a taboo, there's really no issue with that, because you're going to see some Odus that might not necessarily mention certain deities, but that doesn't mean they're a negative aspect or influence, or going to be a negative aspect or influence in the person's life. So it's not a taboo to receive them. And that's a big thing now. Everybody's really focused on deities and receiving them and things like that. And the big key thing here is just really understanding our Odus of Ifa before progressing. Because let's say we have a certain Odu, and Oricha Oko is a general thing, likes a certain Adimu. But maybe in your Odu was where Oricha Oko, preferred, I'm not sure. I mean, preferred bananas to coconuts, and you wouldn't know that unless you actually saw your sign and studied it and really versed yourself in it. So that's really key, understanding your Odu, so you know how to interact with your Orisha on that personal level. There's always going to be general things, but that personal connection is going to come from your Odu of Hand of Ifa, those instructions, right, to get those positive results. See, we still have 5 people watching, guys. Questions? Any questions? Please feel free. Feel free. Anything about Oricha Oko, pertaining to Oricha Oko, in general? Anything that anybody may be thinking about? Last call for questions. Anybody have anything to add? Does besides Yemaya and Chango, does Oko interact with others like Obadala? Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And I guess we're gonna go ahead and say that pataki, right? Definitely, you got me. Orisha Oko's interaction and relationship with Obadala was a good one in the beginning, right? And this is actually in the Odu Oduradi, right? And what ended up happening is a little bit of a backstory before we get into the Orisha Oko aspect of things. Obadala was the owner of the Bata drums, right? And Obadala was kind of like the leader of Ife, obviously, or his specific place where he was occupying at this time. And he was the owner of the Bata drums apart from being the governor. And to be honest with you, Obadala didn't really have much time for the drum, but it was like a power symbol. They entertained him. They were nice to look at. He had more like an ornament in his house rather than an instrument. Well, in some versions in this Odu, he was married to Yemaya, and in other versions, Yemaya was just somebody within society that interacted with him frequently. But Yemaya had a son, and the son's name was Shango, right? And, if you look at Oturadi is known as the Odu of the tambores, or the drums, right? At least within the Afro-Cuban corpus. And Shango was infatuated and obsessed with the drum. he wanted them. He wanted to touch them. It was everything to him. He was like, if I could just get my hands on those things, and being the god of the drum, I'm not sure if he was at this point, but it was definitely something that he was pursuing, right? So what ended up happening is, Chango would always bother his mother about the drums. She would be like, "What do you want, son?" He's like, "I want the drum." His birthday would come around. "I want the drum." Christmas would come around. "I want the drum. I want the drum. I want the drum." So Yemaya got to the point. She said, "I need to make this boy happy. If not, he's going to drive me crazy." So she went to speak to Obadala, right? And Obadala actually had a stand within the market where he would sell yams, right? And, she went to visit him at his stand, the business that he owned. It wasn't that he necessarily worked it, he owned it. And she went like, "Hey, how are you? Baba." He was like, "Everything's good, how are you?" Etc., all the formalities and courtesies. And she was like, "I heard you have a nice set of drums." And he's like, "Oh man, they're wonderful. They are nice." And she said, "I'd really like them for my son. My son, I'm not sure if you know, his name's Shango. Like I said, in some versions they were married and it was their son. Other versions they weren't. My son Shango, he wants to just play the drum and have the drum and touch the drum and all these different things." And Obadala said, and she was like, "Would you sell him to me? Would you give him to me? Would you let him just play him? Like, can you just oblige him, please? He's driving me crazy. Help me out." And Obadala, there's various versions of this, right? But one version said that, Obadala didn't allow Shango to touch the drums because his hands always had red palm oil on them. Another version, which is the more common one, said he just didn't feel like giving them to Chango. And he said, "Absolutely not. The drums are mine." And Yemaya said, "Well, you don't even play the drum. You just have them there. You're really not doing anything with them. You just let my son at least use them. Even if you're not going to give it to him, just let him use it, please." And Obadala said, "No me da la gana. I don't feel like doing that. So, get away from me." It was a little bit rude, Obadala didn't always have the best interpersonal skills. He was kind of, like, I'm Obadala, like, be gone with you. So Yemaya was like, "You're going to give me the drums." And Obadala was like, "I doubt it. I don't think so." And she said, "Yeah, you're going to give me the drums. You watch. One day." Right? And they basically left off like that. So Yemaya noticed, she said, this guy has his yam business, right? Where is he getting these yams? Obadala was the only one who would sell yams. He had a monopoly on it. And he was making a lot of money. And Yemaya said, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. So, what ended up happening was Yemaya kind of went to the outskirts of town and, noticed that there was a farm, right? And there was a gentleman there and his name was Oricha Oko, right? And Oricha Oko was actually the personal farmer of Obadala who would harvest his yams for Obadala to sell them in the marketplace, right? Oricha Oko was a very solitary guy, never interacted with nobody, did his job, like he was just an amazing employee, amazing characteristics, very hardworking, etc. And Yemaya said, I'm gonna see if I can speak to this guy, because he really doesn't talk to anybody, right? And little by little, she would walk by the farm every day and, kind of look at Oricha Oko. And Oricha Oko really never noticed her. He was just so focused on his job. Work. And Oricha Oko was a great deity to invoke for work as well, as a side note. And one day, Oricha Oko kind of looked over and he was like, "Oh man, I think this lady has been walking around the farm, And, when he saw Yemaya, he kind of didn't notice it at the beginning, but with each time he saw her from that point forward, he was like, wow, she's a beautiful woman, right? And, a really, really beautiful ebony-skinned woman. He was like, oh, this is a beautiful woman. Now, mind you, Oricha Oko had never interacted with any woman on an intimate level. He was unexperienced in that aspect. So, once Yemaya noticed that she was getting some attention from him, she would say hi, and he'd be like, hi, and he would keep working. And this one time, he actually took a break to talk to her, and she was like, "I'm Yemaya," and he's like, "Oh, I'm Oricha Oko." And, she was like, "Oh, what do you do?" And he's like, no, I farm, you know, I do this, I do that. She's like, wow, that's really incredible. You know, tell me about that. And Oricha Oko realized that, you know, it was a conversation that was beginning. No one ever really expressed any interest in him. So, you know, he obliged, and they actually started talking. And once again, Oricha Oko realized, wow, this beautiful woman is talking to me, you know. And he kind of became infatuated with her, and she became infatuated with him. And, you know, ultimately one thing led to another, and they ended up becoming intimate, right? So what ended up happening was, you know, after, you know, realizing, you know, the act, Yemaya asked him, you know, what do you farm? Like, what are you actually pulling out of the ground? And he's like, oh, yams, right? Now, mind you, before we get into this next part of the story, Orisha Oko was sworn to secrecy by Obadala to never reveal the way to be able to plant yams, because if anybody else would have gotten this secret, it would have really, you know, destroyed their business, because they had a monopoly on the yam, right? So, you know, Orisha Oko, being that he was always alone, there was really never any chance for him to betray Obadala's trust. And he was a pretty serious guy neither. He didn't feel the need to do that. So, you know, Orisha Oko said, oh, I plant the yam, and I pull out the yam, and I give them to Obadala, and, you know, we have a nice thing going on here. And Yemaya said, I would really love to learn how to plant the yam. Like, I just think that's so amazing, you know, just really feeding into his ego. And Orisha Oko said, yeah, it's really unfortunate, but I could never teach you how to do that, because, you know, Obadala entrusted that information in me, and we have a business, you know, I'm a man of ethic. And Yemaya said, oh, okay, I see how it is. Well, I guess me and you never have to repeat what we just did again, or do what we just did again now, do we? And Yemaya started, you know, dressing and getting ready to leave. And Orisha Oko, never experiencing anything like that beforehand, said, you know, I can't live without that now. And, you know, he basically implored and pleaded with Yemaya not to leave. And she said, the only way I'm not going to leave is if you give me the secret of the yams. And Orisha Oko, unfortunately, falling to, you know, the weaknesses of the flesh, gave her the secret. And at that moment, Yemaya looked as if she was going to leave anyway. And Orisha Oko said, I gave you what you want. Why are you leaving? And she said, I got what I wanted. And Orisha Oko realized at that moment, Yemaya only wanted to be with him because of, you know, his knowledge and basically to get the secret of the yam from him. So at that moment, he knew he was in some pretty deep stuff. And Yemaya went, started planting the yam, etc., and set up her own yam stand in the market. So Obadala one day realizes that his yam stand is not selling, and that's just unheard of, right? So when he noticed other people had yams, he's like, where are you getting those yams from? Those aren't my yams. They were like, no, we're getting them from that lady over there. She sells them for half price. He was like, what? So he went walking very quickly to the other side of the market, and he saw Yemaya selling yams with her son Shango. And he was like, what is going on here? And she said, no, just selling yams, Obadala. He's like, where did you get the yams? Did you steal them from me? She said, no, I planted them myself. And he said, how did you plant them yourself? She said, oh, Orisha Oko taught me how to do it. And Obadala realized at that moment that Orisha Oko had betrayed his trust. You know, and Obadala had some really nasty thoughts about Yemaya that we can't repeat here on Facebook. But, you know, he looked at her and he said, what do you want? This business is mine. The yam belongs to me. What do you want? You know, because this can't continue. You know, it's my business. She said, you know what I want? I want the drums for my son. And Shango just stayed looking. He was like, and Obadala said, you know what? You can have them. You got what you want. But don't sell yams anymore so we don't have any problems. And Yemaya said, I never cared about the yam. I'll take the drums. Obadala sent one of his servants to go get the bata drums. He gave them to Shango. Shango was the happiest man on earth. Yemaya, you know, was able to provide her son with everything he wanted. And they, you know, kept on and gave their crop to Obadala. And Obadala continued with his business. But Obadala went to the farm and Orisha Oko was in hiding. And Obadala found him and cursed him. And he said, you betrayed my trust because of a woman. And Orisha Oko begged for forgiveness and all these different things. And Obadala cursed him, unfortunately. But he kept him on the farm, you know, as a servant. to continue with the yams. So, you know, he was able to continue, but unfortunately, you know, to a certain degree, their relationship was never the same. So, you know, to my friend Dan, that is the interaction, one of the interactions with Oricha Oko and Obadala. Where unfortunately Yemaya put him in a position to basically betray Obadala's trust. It was unfortunate because she took advantage of him. But once again, a recurrent theme within the mythology of Orisha Oko, where you know the man is not compensated correctly. He's unfortunately mistreated. All of these different things. No worries, my friend. No worries. Wonderful story. Wonderful question. Definitely. Almost didn't put that one in there, but yeah, definitely a wonderful story. And it's one of the hundreds of stories that you know I've seen and encountered with Orisha Oko, and you know it's a recurrent theme, but not a bad guy, not a bad Orisha. Somebody that you know wasn't really considered the way he should have been, but you know regardless of which he was able to continue on with life, and you know another message there. You know regardless of whatever happens, you know the human being will work, right? Or you know work is honor. So. Absolutely. Hey, absolutely. Thank you for watching again. I hope, I remember Tierney, we talked about Orisha Oko yesterday and your process of possibly receiving him. You know, we really don't touch much or at all on certain ceremonial aspects of the Orisha. But, you know, we do touch on kind of some of the surrounding aspects of them to kind of understand the Orisha better. So you're definitely going to have, after this video, a lot of information to be able to know how to interact with that deity, right? But definitely a wonderful Orisha, right? Wonderful Orisha. And I remember you had mentioned something about a child of Shango possibly giving you the deity in your specific situation. But I mean, if we look at the story of Orisha Oko and Shango when they were brothers, definitely you know the children of Shango have a high you know connection to the priesthood and the initiation and receiving of Orisha Oko. And, you know, definitely there's going to be a lot of ache there if a child of Shango gives that deity because, you know, they're very connected to that to the point where you look at Orisha Oko and the basis of his colors are red and white. If you look at his necklace, though, it's an interesting combination because there's an azabache, there's some like turquoise and some pink beads, all of these different things. So it's a little different than what you would expect it to be. I have seen Orisha houses that do use a red and white bead when it comes to Orisha Oko as well. It really depends on your house of Orisha and probably the lineage that you come from there. So Orisha Oko, Orisha Oko, you're going to see various things there, right? Has a lot to do with, you know, clay. You're going to see a lot of Orisha Oko's things are going to be very clay based. It's really interesting as well, touching on Orisha Oko. His brother's name is Korikoto, right? Where you're going to hear a suyere within the Afro-Cuban where it says, Kori unkoto milodo, Orisa ewe milodo. That's actually Orisha Oko's brother. So definitely we would have to delve deeper into Ifa to get more information on Korikoto, and we may end up coming up with a video on him. One of the brothers of Orisha Oko, but Shango is also his brother, you know, within that. But you're going to see a lot of association with clay and things like that with Orisha Oko because, you know, Orisha Oko represents the dirt. And when you look in Nigeria, from what I understand, the dirt or the soil is somewhat of a reddish, clayish type color. It's red, right? Beautiful fauna over there. And because of that, you're going to see within our culture, whether it be things that have to do with Egun or Orisha Oko, you're going to see that you're going to have a lot of clay, barro implements that are utilized, and it's basically to bring the presence or that energy of the red earth or our ancestral homeland to wherever we're doing these ceremonies, right? So you're going to see that with Orisha Oko as well. A lot of clay, barro, terracotta things are utilized within his cult and within his practice. So definitely. Also has really beautiful rhythms within the bata drum as well. Orisha Oko songs, very beautiful, very beautiful. The rhythms are beautiful. You know, very, very fundamental part of our culture. You know. and when you hear about Oricha Oko, you're also going to hear that, he's referred to as Omodara, which means the son who was good, or the offspring that was good, right? So, he was even recognized, there's a suya that says, Omodara dei, Omodara die, Olodumare dei, Omodara Orisha Oko, or Omodara, the son who was good, was Orisha Oko, the son of Olodumare. So you're going to see that he's spoken of well. He's spoken of well. He was recognized as having very, very good qualities. He's recognized within Yoruba culture as having really good habits. He would wake up early. He would go to work. He was honest. He was ethical. He was pure. Olodumare recognized him as a good person. He had good within him. He had a very good iwapele. He was somewhat of an omoluabi, right? Or omoluabi, which means owner. Someone who had a good head, good character, good conduct, good person, someone that was complete. And it's recognized even within his various iere and songs. So. That's kind of what his reputation ended up being within E5. He made mistakes, definitely, because, he was a human being. So, but definitely. Questions, guys? Any more questions? Please feel free. On Oricha Oko. This is turning out to be a wonderful video. We've been able to tap into a bunch of aspects. And that's what I love about the videos and the interaction between Facebook Live, because we come in with a certain amount of things that we want to touch on from the Botanica Candles and More standpoint, Joseph Babaifa standpoint. And then, based on you guys, we start getting these real questions, making it very relevant to what's going on in the religious climate now. And then, it really becomes a wonderful video because we're answering questions that, you guys have, and more than likely hundreds of other people may have. So it's very exciting because we're making real strides. So definitely, if anybody else has any other questions, any other comments, please feel free. My cat might want to end up coming in the video. Want to come on the table? Questions, guys? Any comments? Anything to add before we wrap up? Awesome. Well, it seems like we've been able to really put out enough information to really satisfy, any doubts that we may have had on Oricha Oko. To all the people that watched, definitely a wonderful video. We were able to tap into a bunch of different things. We're staying consistent. We're coming out with a bunch of videos. Not sure who tomorrow is going to be on. We may end up doing another open live questionnaire video in the evening. So if anybody that's watching has any general questions about the religion, definitely have them ready for tomorrow when we go live with our open video discussion. So we can go ahead and touch on those. Yesterday was a huge success. Diana, thank you. Thank you for being a wonderful Ihada. My regards to everybody. And please, everybody just stay safe as well with this coronavirus situation that we have going on from a global aspect. Please take care of yourselves, and let's take care of each other. Let's practice, distancing, quarantining, all of these things. Take advantage of this time to be able to reorganize and recenter for when we go back into the real world, right? Just as a side note, when I went to the supermarket yesterday, I felt like, I was reborn, because it was just like, wow, this is the outside world, after being, cooped up in a home for about, I think it's been 72 hours at this point. So, it's one of those things. So prepare yourself mentally, because, things like this don't happen all the time. So take advantage of the moments. Definitely have your questions ready. New video coming out tomorrow as well. to all the people who asked questions, to all the people that watched, to all the people that interacted. Thank you so much for supporting Joseph Baba Ifa and Botanica Candles and more. If you have any, if you please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already done it. This video will be posted on Joseph Baba Ifa YouTube channel. If you haven't had the chance to like Botanica Candles and more, or Joseph Baba Ifa page, if you have the time, please go ahead and do that. If you've interacted with Botanica Candles and more on a business level and we were able to provide you that 5-star experience, please go ahead and leave a review on Google. We still are doing consultations with Ifa, with the Opele, right? During these trying times, being that the Botanica is unfortunately closed. We're still doing orders. So if you need that one spiritual item, Botanica Candles and more, through appointment, can accommodate you, please get in contact with me or any of the people that are affiliated with Botanica Candles and more, such as Chris or my wife Erica. Definitely so we can kind of try to, remain in normalcy as we kind of go through this process over these next 2 weeks. But once again, thank you to everybody who watched. Hope everybody was able to gather something on this obscure Orisha from this video. And once again, guys, thank you so much. And any way we can be of assistance, please let us know here at Botanica Candles and more. So from all of us here at Botanica Candles and more, especially me, Joseph Baba Ifa, just want to say thank you, guys. May Oricha Oko bless you. May Orumila bless you. Baba bless you, and wishing you guys nothing but the best. Safety, security, health, and progress, right? Take care, guys. Nothing but love for you. Take care.